right, hello. So we have a really exciting panel today. So my name is Kit Colbert from VMware. I'm the CTO for Cloud Native Applications. With me today are three panelists. We have Alex Polvey, who's the CEO of CoreOS, and Ben Heineman, who's the Chief Architect of Mesosphere, and then James Waters, who's the GM of Cloud Foundry at Pivotal. So again, 4 different companies, all in this cloud native application space, and really all focused on security in different ways. So I think before we dive into the discussion around security, maybe we can just have each of you guys introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about what you're doing at your respective companies.
Sure. So I'm Alex Polvey, founder, CEO of CoreOS. We are building this set of software that enables, what we're calling cloud native, this emerging way of running infrastructure. And we really did it because we think that it opens up a new possibility in terms of security. We think that to fundamentally change the way that secure systems are built, we need to just change the architecture overall. And the architecture that we're all driving towards this is the one we're
kind of rebuilding it from the ground up.
Exactly.
Securing the internet.
Securing the internet.
Yeah.
That's everything we've built is sort of that.
It's a lofty goal. That's good. That's good.
Someone has to try.
All right, Ben.
So I'm Ben Heineman, Chief Architect and co-founder at Mesosphere, and also the co-creator of Apache Mesos. And what we're doing at Mesosphere is we're trying to build a product that we call the data center operating system. And it's this new kind of operating system that really runs across all the machines in your data center. And it's built on Apache Mesos, which is a project that I've been working on in the open source community for about five or 6 years now, and it's used at a bunch of companies like Twitter and Netflix and PayPal, Airbnb, these companies. And really what we're trying to do at Mesosphere is make it easier to build and run new we call them data center services, these cloud native applications. And so there's a bunch of components in that, we're working with lots of folks like the CoreOS guys to make that be a reality too.
Awesome, cool, thank you. Okay, James.
Yeah, so I work at a company called Pivotal, and one of our primary R&D and product focuses is something called Cloud Foundry, which is a largely container-based platform. And in terms of security, our insight there is really twofold. One is that in the first generation, we had a lot of heterogeneous deployment styles, so different operating systems, a lot of heterogeneity across different kind of deployments, apps, OSs, everything. That was sort of a security nightmare, and I think that's kind of where Alex is coming from. And we really focus on having a contract between the application and the platform that allows day 2 operations to be automated. And that means if you want to update the operating system, if you want to version the application, if you want to control things, that contract really enables that. And that's the message that we've taken to enterprise IT pretty successfully over the last year.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's dig into it. I mean, you kind of highlighted some of these points, James, about how you're talking with customers. I'd like to hear from each of you guys about what are you hearing from customers around their security concerns? Because each of you kind of come at it from a slightly different angle, right? The security context. And there's obviously a lot of moving parts here in this ecosystem, a lot of different things to secure. So I'm kind of interested to get each of your perspectives from the business you're building, the products you're building, as well as what your customers are saying. And I guess, Alex, we can start with you.
Sure. So I think if you talk to any IT ops team, do you care about security? They will say yes. But the issue is it's a very difficult topic, and it's something that is easily overlooked. It's easy to screw up and so on. So I think it's actually the responsibility of us as vendors in this space to do sort of the right thing by our users and not cut corners, even if they're not chomping at that bit, being like, I need the latest elliptic curve, blah, blah, blah. It's the sort of thing that the onus is on us to provide these systems, and we're at a point just on the internet where there's, we can't joke around anymore about it. Yep. It's like, welcome to 2015, like no one is safe. And so as vendors, we have to put the onus on ourselves to do this, even if our customers don't know the intricacies of all of it. But fortunately, our customers are saying they want it. It's like, look, all of our companies up here are tackling this emerging market in different ways, but like it means it's going to happen. Like whether or not VMware takes the hat, or Mesos runs the world's infrastructure, or CoreOS, patches every kernel out there. Like, this wave of infrastructure is happening, and I think the other side of it is a much more secure internet. Specifically, if we as vendors just actually take it seriously on behalf of our users.
That's great. You're right. I think you're absolutely right. There is the direction where it's going that's inevitable. It's going to happen. And so really it's like, how can we build the right technologies to actually help our customers be successful there? So Ben, how about from your point of view.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of our customers today especially want to use lots of different existing and new cloud-native applications that are being built, and it's a big pain in the butt because they got to pull them into their operating environment. They got to somehow get them to work with their security environment, right? And from our perspective, we would like to get to a world where you can build a new cloud-native application against an API, a security API, a security service, whatever it is, and then you could build it in one organization and you can easily move it into another organization. And that's, that's exactly what we got when we provided operating systems for our laptops and for our servers and for our phones, right? And that layer of abstraction, that operating system layer of abstraction, is really that key thing, and a big part of it is security. And so from our perspective, we want to help fill that gap, that security gap, so you can go build some new cloud-native application in one organization and just very, very easily run it in another organization. And if in one organization you decide to maybe speak CoreOS, and another organization you decide to speak PKI, that's completely fine.
Right.
But you're using this API to actually realize that, and that's just going to make it's going to keep us from being held back from being able to actually accelerate a lot of what we're trying to do in organizations today.
Yeah, I think you hit on a good point that you need to be seamless and easy. I mean, if it's too difficult for a developer or someone to build an app that actually leverages those technologies, that's not going to happen, right? James.
Yeah, maybe I'll share some practical, on the road, thankless business travel anecdote here. And
is your boss watching?
Hi, Rob. Yeah, so. We went to a company, it was a rental car company. So again, not a classic software-centric company like Netflix. And they're trying to solve, how do we start moving out to Amazon? And the first way they did it is they said, okay, we've got these APIs to provision infrastructure. We'll let our dev teams go provision infrastructure with APIs. And they had a couple little Python scripts that helped them do that. And then what they found was that day two operations was really difficult. Just because they'd enabled the provisioning angle didn't mean that it enabled the day two operations. So everyone had gone out and configured ELBs in a slightly idiosyncratic way. They had deployed different operating systems. And then Ghost came out and they all needed a patch and update. And they're like, well, how do we now tell our developers systematically to go do that? And I think that's one of the things as you make this transition to cloud is that just API-based provisioning is not a platform. And we really try to posit that you need a holistic platform. And so we come at that in a different way. When you use Cloud Foundry, we no longer allow the developer to SSH into the container or SSH into the virtual machine. And the reason is once they're there, they can do all those same things that kind of took that rental car company off the rails, which is they could configure things in different ways, set different patch levels. And so Cloud Foundry is a platform that allows uniform deployment of all patch levels, routing, et cetera. And then all you do is you give the application artifact to us, we build a container and then run it. And so we've really changed the surface area both on the platform operations and the developer interface pretty holistically.
So kind of giving guardrails there for what developers can do and to make sure they can't accidentally shoot themselves in the foot from a security perspective.
That's right, because in a sense just using Amazon APIs by themselves just accelerates bad behavior if you're not careful.
Right. So actually I want to play up on a point that Ben was sort of making, this interesting notion of can you actually build security into the infrastructure, into these underlying components, and what does that look like? I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on that. Whoever can jump in first.
So I think the key thing that's changing in our world right now, which enables the security, is thinking about the application first. So this cloud native applications, it's about the application as the object. And kind of as James was alluding to, if you just say, here's my code, here's my application, you can change everything around it. You can change how you patch the thing, you can change how you lock it down, you can change everything. And that's really what's required at this point. We're not going to be able to change the way all ops teams like to go SSH into a box and futz around. We need to make them not care about the OS anymore. We need to make them not care about the security system. So again, we can just go and do it right once and for all. And the thing that unlocks that is having the end user just focus on the application and just let the rest kind of fall out of that. And once the user forgets about the server, we can really go nuts. We can turn off SSH. We can trusted computing, bring that thing up. We can run the application in a fully isolated environment such that it's not able to get to other parts of the host and so on. And we can do that without the user really needing to do anything other than focus on their application. It's almost just forget about the rest, worry about your application, so that we can kind of turn everything else on.
Right. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll just gonna follow up on that. We need to make it ridiculously easy for every next developer that's building the next cloud-native application to make security be a primary concern from day one. I think in most of the projects, especially open source projects that many of us probably run, security gets put in as an afterthought, and usually gets put in as an afterthought based on the organization that happens to be running that application the most, which again makes it tedious to run those applications in other organizations. And so I think to do that, we really need strong open source projects like Lightwave and other projects like that with strong interfaces, APIs that developers can start using from day one, and actually build software that from day one is secure and has authentication and authorization in some component of ACLs. And I think that's going to enable us to take a step back and then abstract away the actual implementations of how we're doing the security, and just let the software kind of do its thing.
Yeah, one of the things that we did is we built multi-tenancy into the platform. And so another just business travel story, you know, it's not necessarily urgent security, but you might have things that are in dev that accidentally talk to prod. And you're like, okay, how do we manage credential management across these things so that you don't have drift? So another angle of configuration drift is not just the patch level, as we mentioned, but also access. And so we built teams and organizations and policy groups called spaces into Cloud Foundry at a multi-tenant layer that you can map different services that you're allowed to talk to from certain apps right into the platform. And so as the application comes up, it's configured based on that policy as it comes up, as opposed to by the individual developer. So they can only access services that they're entitled to on their team. Yep. And so again, that makes it systematic to think about that kind of configuration versus kind of the bad old days of there's a spreadsheet somewhere where the all the access and et cetera is stored.
Yeah, and I really liked what you said, Alex. That it's all about the app. Right, that's what it really comes back to, and everything that we do surrounding the app is just made as there just to help run that app as efficiently and make it as easy as possible. And so I think it's interesting how we're seeing the evolution of infrastructure. We're kind of as we're standardizing more of infrastructure in for these next gen apps, we can actually have the infrastructure do more than it traditionally has. And again, security is sort of a big thing that way the developer of the app doesn't need to think about, right? And they have that kind of bubble that they can work in. So okay, so. Shifting gears a little bit, we talked previously, and Ben, you mentioned Lightwave, Project Lightwave, a new project from VMware. We also announced Project Photon, and then we have the Open Virtual Network project as well, amongst some other open source projects that we're doing. And so this is a good start, but obviously there's a lot to do in the security space. So what are some of the next steps? Again, when you talk to customers, the top of mind things for them around security, hopefully these products will address some of those, but presumably there's a lot more to do. And so what do you guys have next on sort of your roadmaps, and what's top of mind for you?
I think one of the things that we're going to do is pretty important is a application level identity service that you can just buy into any application. So if you want an OAuth service, it's going to be available natively in the platform. You can bake that right into your app. And the developer never has to stand that up. So making it easier and easier to have identity services hardwired into the applications as they come up is something I think all of these cloud-native platforms are going to have to get right over time. Sometimes people would defer that to a higher level like DMZ or higher level service, but I think at a microservices architecture, you've got to be more thoughtful in that and a more granular level.
Yeah, so from our perspective, one of the primitives that we're trying to provide in Mesos, which is kind of our kernel for our data center operating system, are primitives that are helping programmers that are actually building new cloud-native applications to do things like security. So to do things like authentication, authorization, to understand concepts like ACLs. And that's a really, really big driver for us. And that's why Lightwave is a really interesting piece of technology from our perspective, is because if we can actually provide that API like an operating system does, but actually defer the real implementation to something like Lightwave for however the organization wants to set up their policies, that's fantastic. But from our perspective, what that really gains the ecosystem is just the ability that you can write this application once and then run it in lots of different organizations. So that's a big driver from us, and it's really just, again, it's going back to providing the programmatic APIs to our data center operating system for these cloud-native applications to be able to use.
Cool.
I'd say, like, in general, our approach is let's turn it all on. Like if there's a trusted computing feature, if there is a mandatory access control feature, if there's opportunities to run lightweight, full virtualization around applications, like it's time that we just turn it all on. If we can do that in a way that's easy to use and it doesn't get in the way of deploying your application, why not turn it all on? We think that we were talking about multi-tenancy and having multi-tenancy as a first-class citizen. A lot of companies cut corners around multi-tenancy, but the fact is your environment's going to be multi-tenant at some point, and you better treat it as as rigorously as a public cloud service provider would. So just really turning on all the enabling technology out there that's sitting around but hasn't been being picked up because it's difficult to use or hard to wrap your head around. But because of this transition to cloud native, we can flip it all on without without people knowing. And so at that point, let's do it. Let's turn it on. Let's get the internet. Finally.
Yeah. Cool. So, okay. So I guess so this is cool. So in each of you guys, again, as we talked about, had slightly different focus areas. But one commonality is that all your technologies, all your products work really well on top of vSphere. And so there's a lot of vSphere admins out there, a lot of workloads running on vSphere. And as we talked about previously, a lot of folks are looking at how they can take that existing infrastructure investment they have and kind of extend it. So what are, do you have kind of pieces of advice that you give to when you talk to customers about this on the best way to leverage a vSphere install and then build on top of it with your products? James?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really exciting to us about vSphere is how stable its API is. And so a lot of people talk about cloud provisioning, but we live it. So when we go to install, you cannot install Cloud Foundry one OS at a time, one VM at a time, which means we really stress the provisioning API. And we've found vSphere to be the most reliable, repeatable infrastructure to automate against right now. And I think that's a huge opportunity for every customer that has that stable vSphere environment to then go to the line of business that's building these new cloud-native applications, say, I can deliver a new class of service to you, which is really a cloud-native platform. And so we can help them go from that very solid vSphere provisioning API the whole way to the line of business. And it takes about half an hour to do a push-button install of Cloud Foundry on a vSphere environment. So I'm really excited about what has been 4 years of R&D collaboration on the API there.
Yeah, I mean, we see lots of folks that are taking Mesosphere and running the technology on top of the data center that was effectively provisioned from virtual machines from vSphere. So from our perspective, there's a lot of opportunity for organizations to do that. You get the really strong isolation guarantees of something like virtual machines, but you're able to pool all the resources together. I think helping organizations to actually make that jump is a critical part of our business, and I think most of our business is here. To Alex's point earlier, keeping, or maybe it was yours, I forget, I'm sorry, but keeping people from SSHing into boxes. I think it was your point.
I said it first, and then Alex.
Okay, yeah.
We're all riffing up here on that.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing was when you used to SSH into boxes at Twitter, when you first showed up, you can type, you can see whatever shows up in the command line. We had a giant cowboy, ASCII art cowboy show up, and it was like, don't be cowboying around here, right? Because that's what ends up happening when organizations, when you do just let everybody kind of SSH. But really, what you want instead is you want to be able to take the virtual machines that you can get from environments like vSphere, just pull those resources together and then just run applications on top. And no one's SSHing into boxes. You're running stateless apps, you're running stateful apps, they're secure. And so finding the right technologies to be able to do that is pretty critical.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think, so in your point, like no cowboying, in our world, we're like, let's just turn off writes to the root file system. Yeah. And then like done, you can't cowboy it anymore. Exactly. So it's like productize the operational thing as much as possible. Now again, that like blows a lot of people's minds when they log in, then they're like, why can't I change the file or whatever, but it's, and it can get in the way sometimes. But that's that's the sort of thing that trying to, again, productize these like operational best practices in a way that makes things more secure.
But I think that, it hits on the notion that the practices of operations will need to change a little bit in this next gen space, right? That you can't just do the same thing you were doing exactly.
Well, if you think of where we've come from though, it used to be that you'd log into a big vertically scaled system to performance tune it, right? That's why you needed SSH. You're like, okay, I got to tweak settings on here to run this big Oracle DB at max throughput. So you needed to be in there on that single system. Now you're like, I just threw 30 more nodes at it. So part of what's changed is that cloud native pattern has changed their operational.
Yep.
It's not just that was inherently bad. They did it at a time for a reason. It's just we've obviated that now with scale out technology, I think.
And I mean, it's better for so many reasons, because when that one node that you happen to set up in that one particular way happens to fail, then what do you do?
Right.
Right? So it's much nicer to be in a world where you have automated that away, and then you can deal with the failures, which are inevitable to happen, whether it's software failures or it's hardware fails. It's just going to happen.
Yeah. I think that gets to the higher order bit. I mean, we're talking about security, but in a large respect, the ability to manage at scale is kind of a security problem in and of itself, right? Like if you don't know what's going on, you got all these different configurations of these systems there. How do you make sure they're standardized and updated appropriately? All these sorts of problems. I think it's a really big issue. The thing that I hear a lot is sort of this pets versus cattle mentality, right, of management, and how it really changes from when you're just doing a few instances of a thing to 1,000 instances of a thing. It changes. So whether it's immutable infrastructure or what have you.
I think it's so that the job of like an operations team doesn't go away because of this, but they do need to be more leveraged. You need to be able to run more infrastructure with the same team and like do more and have more infrastructure because just everybody's environments are growing. And so I think that these patterns, there's a number of value props for cloud native apps, but one of them I think is operational leverage. Like your ops team can run 1,000 servers, where before they were only able to run 100, and the reason they can do that is because of pets versus cattle and some of the security systems and updates and blah blah blah. All these components just create leverage. It's like your ops team utilization versus your server farm utilization.
It's an important metric.
It's so true. Yeah, I mean, while it's noble for somebody to be able to remember like the configurations of all 100 of their machines, it's really not a great use of their brain power, and they can be doing a lot of other things to be able to go from 100 machines to thousands of machines.
But I think we should talk about the journey that enterprise customers have to go on to get here, right? It's not like this technology is here now, you turn it on, you port your apps and away they go. There are a lot of architects and developers in the same car rental company I visited that are used to writing applications that can rely on local container state. Right. So that they don't have to, if a transaction's mid-flight, they just ask the Java container, hey, where's that at? Can you retrace that for me? Roll that back, roll that forward. So there really is a advocacy challenge of how do you develop cloud-native applications. And I think that's just as important as part of this as the new operational paradigm is getting to the app architects and the app developers and teaching them things like, in our case, Spring Cloud, which leverages the Netflix OSS, microservices, enablement tech. So I think that's a huge part of this discussion.
Right. I mean, any thoughts from you guys on that? How are you seeing customers being able to deal with that sort of transition, from monolithic to distributed?
Yeah, I mean, it's as James just pointed out, it's inevitable and it's very clear. The strategy that we've been taking is to say, how can we take your existing legacy applications and run them in our environment that looks as close to your current environment as possible, which means you don't get some of the benefits of the fault tolerance we provide, you don't get some of the benefits of the scalability you provide, but you run it in our environment. And what you do get is as you start to evolve from the legacy stuff to the new stuff, you're just in that one environment, you're using that for everything. The old applications that are running are starting to be tweaked, and eventually they migrate from sort of the old to the new. And working closely with customers to understand how to actually do that migration. But it's nice to get people on sort of a platform to start where they can be building the new things in a really effective way, while at the same time let them be running their old things just without all the guarantees that you might be able to get with the new cloud native architectures.
There was a graphic during Pat's talk of a bridge, and it was like there's a, I don't know what the characterization was, but it was like the
client server.
Client server versus
the
mobile cloud. Yeah, then there's a bridge in the middle, and I still think that ops teams are gonna have to drive across the bridge, because that one side is just on fire and burning down. At some point, it's time to drive across the bridge to the other side where it's better. Now you still got to put out the fires. You can't just completely dump it, and it's not going away. But I think the reason containers and on all this stuff is starting to blow up is because there is demand for a new way. People want a different thing than they had before because the existing way of running infrastructure is a total mess everywhere. And so I think that the whole reason we're here, I think the reason containers are taking off, applications are coming to the forefront is because you realize this is the architecture required to actually make this stuff manageable. And it is time to kind of cut your ties in some areas and move forward to the next thing. Now, again, that doesn't mean that That doesn't mean you're going to just throw away everything and we can do that overnight, but I do think there's a distinct pattern and things need to start being ported over there.
Well, I think and I think you hit on the topic pretty well in the sense that this transition is going to be extraordinarily difficult, right? Like you take a traditional app, you can't just toss it into a next-gen cloud-native app architecture or infrastructure because it's just going to fall over. It's not going to scale.
Right.
It's not,
I looked at that graphic. I hope that wasn't one of those bridges that fell over.
Tacoma Narrows. No, I think that was a good bridge.
Okay, good.
But yeah, so I mean, I guess maybe that's a good point to sort of wrap up. So we talked about a bunch of different things here. We started out with security. We kind of got to this notion of how you have to evolve your operations and a broader concept, how you just evolve in general to these next-gen apps. And I think, obviously security plays a role throughout all of that, right? So maybe just have each of you guys give some last thoughts on the cloud-native app space, where you see it going, the security's role in it, and what you want to do. Alex, we can start with you.
Sure. I'm probably hitting this one home a little bit, but the change to this application first thinking means that we can change a lot of things around it. Security, for the reasons we started our company when I started working on this, things are at the forefront of our mind, but it's also going to change how you do performance, reliability, kind of everything you get by latest generation stuff. So I think the shift to app first thinking is what we all want. We want people to think about that application as the object and focus on that, and then again, as us as vendors can kind of take care of the rest, making the world a better place for our users.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this event really highlighted our perspective really well, which is developers need to be first class in the data center, and the applications that they're running need to be first class in the data center. And we kind of have this combination, and we have almost two different kinds of developers in most of our organizations. We have the ones that build the applications, and we have the runs which deploy the applications, and they end up having to write a whole bunch of code to actually deploy those applications, right? The code that they're writing is doing a lot of the things that you highlighted earlier, Kit, like noticing when they should provision out, noticing when there's a failure and what they do about it. It's two completely different sets of developers, and we should actually unify those and have a single developer that is first class, that is building against the data center, building their software against the data center. And so, our perspective is that to do that, you really need something like a data center operating system. You need that abstraction layer, and a really critical component of that is security. What is the API for security? What's the equivalent for people that are trying to build new applications? They don't just want to get resources and run their applications. They want to do it in a secure way. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really critical part, and it's something that we're going to be continuing to spend a lot of time and effort on.
Awesome. James.
I think the thing that gets me up in the morning, excites me, is when, for too long, I think, the business units and IT have been antagonistic over the last 5 years as people are starting to try to build these scale-out mobile applications. This is not new. And, as we see customers coming to us and saying, this is the most innovative thing we've done in 10 years, in 15 years. And the idea now that technologies exist where you can actually just go consume a platform. You don't have to have IT build you one, right? Which is always the sort of make work project. That there are technologies now that off the shelf, you can have a cloud native platform in a private data center and unleash your line of business in a secure way. I think it's going to be really revolutionary over the next couple of years. And it's going to reduce that sense of antagonism between IT and innovation in a way that we never saw before. And I think it was I think it's really important to this whole idea of the cloud generation that it's less about where and more about how. And I think that's what we all stand for, is that there's a new way of doing things in a secure way, and that how can be in any data center.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming, Alex, Ben, James. Really appreciate it. Great insights that you guys have into the industry, the space, the security aspect, and where it's all going. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you guys for watching.